Welcome everybody to the Cover 2 podcast. My name is Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this is a Cover 2 podcast, a little bit World Series edition. We're going to be talking about the World Series today. Quite a bit here on the show. We'll have a full segment for you on that. Dodgers versus Red Sox.
Did you almost say
Yankees? I get the Yankees in my head, man.
I don't know. Where'd that come from?
On. But yeah, Dodgers and Red Sox. Obviously, Game 1 has already happened. If we are recording here on a Wednesday, so Game 1 has already happened. So we already know that the Red Sox are up 1-0. We will go over the whole series, though, like it hasn't really started yet, and then we'll kind of get into the Game 1 shenanigans and all that stuff. So we'll also talk a lot about the NFL, as we got a lot of NFL stories, and of course, the Lakers-Rockets brawl. All that and more coming up today here on the Cover 2 podcast. Jared, the World Series has started. It's Boston. It's LA. We see this rivalry all the time in sports. I think the most popular one is Celtics and Lakers. They really get into it, and now we get the first time ever, crazy enough, that the Red Sox and Dodgers are playing in the World Series. When we kind of looked at the playoffs overall, were these the two teams you thought would eventually get in, or was there a team that you thought would be better than one of these two?
These two were both definitely in the conversation. Yeah. And the Red Sox, I think, a little more the way their season went. They were pretty dominant throughout the entire season. They were the best team in the MLB. They were, without a doubt. The Dodgers, I think we all knew that they were going to get back to the playoffs, but they had kind of a tougher road within their division. I mean, it's not like they were kind of sweeping by, right? It took them until late in the season to actually grab a hold of that division lead. For the majority of the year, they were sitting and teetering back and forth between first and second place. So I think for them, I don't know if they had a bad hangover from last year's World Series, obviously when they lost to the Houston Astros, but they throughout the whole year, it was a roller coaster, up and down season. You obviously had injuries to a lot of your pitching staff and star players, so I think that played a huge factor in that. But these two teams were definitely in the conversation, and now they're here. And 8-4, that was a surprising final score for me. I mean, you look at it, Chris Sale, Clayton Kershaw, right? Yeah. Like, can we get two better pitchers to start off a World Series, and we get an 8-4 game? That was pretty surprising to me.
No, it was, and obviously both pitchers didn't end up pitching too well in Game 1. They almost did the exact identical thing. They went 4+, left runners on base, and ended up causing other runs because of their actions. In Chris Sale's case, it was more of the Dodgers just working great counts against him. They got a couple big hits. It wasn't necessarily like he was completely off. It was just the Dodgers, I thought, put up great at-bats in the first two innings, and then when they got to the second half, or the second part of their lineup, or the second time around, they were able to put more bats, even better at-bats up, and they got Chris Sale almost to 100 pitches in the fourth inning.
I was just going to say, by the fourth inning, he was at 85 pitches already. Yeah. I remember Joe Buck had announced that, and I was sitting there. I was like, wow, 85 pitches already? I'm like, there's no way he's going 6. He's going to be done by the 5th.
It was done by the 5th, which in this playoffs has kind of been a Chris Sale staple. I mean, the game I was at, Game 1 against the Yankees, he only went into the 5th inning. There's been other times where he hasn't been as dominant, and I think it might have to do with the fact that he only really has 2 pitches. I would say 2.5. He throws his changeup not too often, but it's really based on his fastball that's in the mid to high 90s, and that just wicked nasty slider, curveball, whatever that is, that he throws. So I think hitters can kind of work the counts against him because you're expecting 2 things, and you can foul balls off when you're only expecting 2 pitches. A lot of these guys, for example, like a Kershaw, may be a little harder to hit because there's 3 or 4 pitches you got to worry about. But in Kershaw's case, he didn't pitch too well. I thought Kershaw had the worst outing in this game. He's walking guys, throwing 2-strike pitches high in the zone. I mean, you can look at some of the bigger hits of the game, although you can blame defense on some of them from the Dodgers. Kershaw on 1-2 or 2-2 is throwing balls down the middle, and that just can't happen. And JD Martinez smacked a couple balls off him, and Benintendi got on 4 times because of it, and Mookie Betts, after he almost popped out in the first inning, slammed the ball right back at him because he threw a high changeup. And so, Kershaw just cannot figure it out, it seems like, in the playoffs, how to be the dominant pitcher he is during the regular season. He's still a good pitcher, don't get me wrong. He's not giving up 7-8 runs like some other guys have in the playoffs. But it's just he's not pitching like a true ace. And I think the Dodgers aren't going to win the World Series if he doesn't pitch well. And I know he didn't pitch well in Game 5 last year. He pitched well in Game 1 last year, so I'm hoping that he'll pitch good in his next start.
I mean, his confidence had to be hurt, right? You start off on the mound in the first inning, and right away, boom, down 2-0, right? It's like, man, that's just got to be rough not only for him, but for the rest of the team as well. It's like, dang, man, it's like all this adrenaline, all this energy. It's the World Series, and we get out of the first inning and we're down 2-0 already.
Well, yeah, and it's tough because if you look at on the second pitch of the game, Mookie Betts fouls the ball off in foul territory and it's not caught by David Freese. Okay, that extends that should be an out. In the World Series, you got to make those plays. He hits the base hit. Kershaw makes a mistake. Whatever. He then steals a base. Andrew Benintendi hits a ball. He beats the shift, hits it through a couple defenders. The run scores. You can blame that run essentially on David Freese if you want, and then Puig decides to try to throw out Mookie Betts at home when he's essentially already home plate. Benintendi then goes to second base. There's another defensive mistake. And then J.D. Martinez, after a Kershaw mistake, eventually knocks in Benintendi. So, in a way, if the guys weren't shifted because the Mookie Betts was on second base, Benintendi probably gets out. There's probably 2 outs, and you might not even see J.D. Martinez in that inning. So, the defense didn't help Kershaw there, but yeah, you're right. It continued later in the game. He never really had one of those solid, quick Kershaw innings, and that's what you need, especially when your bullpen's been used, a lot in the playoffs so far.
Right. We're definitely going to continue talking about this game, but I really want to know, when's Kershaw's next start going to be? Are they going to push it?
Well, here's the thing. It just depends on what happens in the series, because if you're down, let's say 0-3, he's probably needs to pitch Game 4. That's dire circumstances. I don't think that will be what it is. I think even though the Dodgers lost 8-4, it was essentially one big home run that ended up making the score a little higher. I thought these teams were pretty even the way they played. And like we were mentioning, both aces didn't pitch too well. So you could have seen maybe one ace go over the other there. They didn't end up doing that. So I say Kershaw Game 5, about 95% chance that happens, barring them going down 0-3. But I don't think that will happen. I think the Dodgers are too good, and after what happened last year, you don't lose. I don't even think they'll lose multiple playoff games in this World Series. They could lose the series, but I don't think they lose 2 games in a row. But I want to stay on this game a little bit because I want to get your take. Because my dad and I, we were even talking about this morning. It's 5-4. The Dodgers have just scored a run to make it a 1-run game. You're in the bottom of the 7th inning. Pedro Baez is in. Now, Pedro Baez has been arguably the Dodgers' best reliever the entire season. Kenley Jansen has been off and on, so I'm going to give Baez. I think Baez has been the best reliever for the Dodgers all season. Strikes out 2 men, and then it's first and second, 2 outs. Dominant performances. The only reason it was first and second is because they intentionally walked J.D. Martinez. But Dave Roberts pulls him and puts in lefty Alex Wood. 2 pitches later, Eduardo Nunez 3-run home run.
Pinch hit
home run.
3-run home run.
What did you think about Dave Roberts pulling Pedro Baez in the 7th inning?
I wasn't a big fan of it, and because you mentioned, because he has probably been the most consistent and best reliever the Dodgers have had, and I don't know if it was a gut feeling. I don't know if he just said, I want to save his arm for Game 2, 3, and 4. I don't know what went through his mind. Obviously, we're sitting here playing Tuesday morning quarterback, right? Yeah. So obviously, we're going to sit here and say that was a bad choice. But in that particular moment, I would not have done that. Regardless, I think you this is the World Series. You put all the chips on the table, right? There's nothing that you can leave, no stone unturned. So I'm letting my guy go out there and throw as long as he can. As long as he can. Like, if Kershaw was still pitching well, I would have left Kershaw in 7 or 8 innings, right? Obviously, he wasn't, and he had to get pulled. So I'm trying to get my best pitchers out there, and he's probably, going to come back and say, well, it was because of a certain matchup, or we like this guy against righties, whatever the case is. I don't like it. And listen, everyone's going to think that we're playing Monday morning quarterback because everyone's going to say the same thing, but it's just, I'm like, really? You're going to pull out probably your best reliever in the World Series like that?
It's so frustrating when Dave Roberts does this, though, because he did this last year a couple times with guys. I remember he brought in Brandon Morrow in a tough situation, and Morrow gave up big home runs in that crazy Game 5 against the Astros. Obviously, we know him not pulling Yu Darvish early enough in Game 7 and potentially not starting a better starter in that game. Although I would have started Darvish, too. I don't think that's totally on Dave. But... okay, so here's what I see about this. And Dave Roberts did come out and say that, he saw that Rafael Devers, who's had a great playoffs and had a great game so far, including a big RBI single, was really good against righties. I understand that thinking. I get it. I disagree, though, that you don't let Pedro Baez, who arguably is better than Rafael Devers at his job... I think you just have him go against the lefty. There's a lot of lefties that are good against right-handed pitchers. That's kind of a weak excuse. So I already would have kept Baez in over that excuse. I would have been complaining today if they did just that. The other problem is there's 2 lefty relievers in the Dodgers bullpen. One of them has not pitched very well in the playoffs. His name's Alex Wood. And there was, honestly, before the games, I was listening to a lot of talk radio before the game. There was talk why Alex Wood even made the roster. Because you have Caleb Ferguson, who pitched very good for the Dodgers in the playoffs so far. And then you had Scott Alexander, who was a free agent that they actually traded for, or excuse me, not free agent, a player they actually traded for before the season started because they loved his lefty arm. And so I thought those were the 2 guys that should have made the roster in the first place. Not only does Caleb Ferguson not make the roster, Scott Alexander makes the roster instead of him, but Alex Wood remains on the team, and they don't bring in Scott Alexander, who they just added to the roster. Why do you add Scott Alexander to the roster if you're not going to pitch him in a high-pressure situation? What else is he there for, right? There's 2 lefties. Alex Wood has given up 3 of the biggest home runs against the Dodgers this playoffs. It's all come on the first batter he faces. So... I get you want to have him face Rafael Devers, who he ended up not facing because Eduardo Nunez and I think Dave Roberts forgot there could be pinch hitters in games. But I didn't even like the fact that Alex Wood came into that game besides another player. So that my thing was just keep Baez in, live and die by Baez, and let him give up the big home run. And then you can say, I should have took him out, all that stuff. No matter what, Dave Roberts was going to get crap on this. Unless he strikes out or gets Rafael Devers out, right? But I thought even bringing Alex Wood into the game was terrible, and I don't even think Alex Wood should pitch unless it's dire circumstances again in this World Series. I don't know why he's on the roster.
Now, this is coming from someone who's not a baseball guru in a sense, and I understand that Kenley Jansen is the closer.
Yes.
But with the game close, before the 3-run home run by Nunez, do you not bring Jansen in a situation where it's a close game like that? Yeah. Do you only bring him in if it's a save situation or if you have a lead? Because obviously at that time the Dodgers didn't have the lead.
Yeah, let's say this. Not this early in the series. I think later in the series, let's say they're down 3-1 or 3-2, you need to bring Jansen in the situation. But here's the thing. What I'm saying, though, is that Pedro Baez is just a notch below. He's we don't really see the setup man necessarily anymore. You see a lot more guys just going longer innings and more closers and all that stuff. You see more setup men, so there's not that true setup man. I think Pedro Baez is that true setup man, the Dodgers. So I think he is the guy to bring in the 7th and 8th inning in these big situations, which is just why I'm saying just keep him in. And I would be surprised if Dave Roberts, we see Game 2 tonight or Wednesday, if Dave Roberts brings Pedro Baez in and just keeps him in a whole inning. Because I think Baez is that guy that can extend. He can go longer in games. Baez has not had any crazy innings so far this World Series. So his arm is pretty much the same it's been all year. Jansen's kind of pitched longer in games and stuff like that. But No, I don't think you bring Kenley Jansen in unless unless you're down in the series. I think early in these games you can afford to lose, so you can make these mistakes, but you don't want to make the mistakes and overexert your best pitcher, and that's Kenley Jansen. So no, I don't think they bring him in unless it's later in the series.
Okay, switching from pitching to hitting, I wanted to ask this, and especially to you as a Dodgers fan. The Dodgers, for the first time in World Series history, started an all right-handed batting lineup. And obviously Chris Sale, a lefty, was on the mound, and he has dominated left-handed hitters so far throughout the whole season and basically his career. What did you think about the Dodgers starting an all right-handed hitting lineup?
You know what? I wasn't totally against it. Because if you looked at Sale's splits, he was way better against against lefties. So I understood that. My one gripe on it was that I thought Cody Bellinger put way better swings on the ball in Game 7 than he had the rest of the playoffs, and I think he was kind of starting to find his groove. Obviously, he hit a home run, so I'm not trying to overreact here. But it looked like he changed his stance, and he was putting better swings on the ball. So I thought he should have been playing in center in this game. Kike Hernandez was the one that started instead. Kike Hernandez has had a horrendous playoffs and even worse NLCS. I think he's batting below 100, if I'm not mistaken. Kike needs to be on the roster because he's so versatile. The dude literally can play every position. He even pitched this year. So Kike needs to be on the roster, of course, but I thought Bellinger, you need to put one lefty in there so you're not, so you're not totally righty. I did agree with Dozier. Dozier had batted over 300, 3 home runs against Sale in the past. Of course, he's former Minnesota Twin. The Twins played the White Sox a lot, so there was that familiarity. Machado with great stats against him. And the rest of the Dodger righties are pretty solid players. You put Matt Kemp in there at DH. I think that's perfect because Matt Kemp's a minus defender. I don't think he needs to be in the field, so playing him at DH is his, to be honest, perfect position. If he ever gets off the Dodgers and moves to the AL, I think he's prototypical DH. But no, my only gripe was really just Cody Bellinger. I like stacking the righties. Today in the game against David Price, who's going to pitch.
David Price.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll get into that later.
I'm more than happy that we're down 0-1 and we got David Price. We're facing David Price. So, but I think you slot Bellinger in there. Bellinger put on some good swings. Bellinger or Jock Peterson. I think either of those guys could be slotted in the lineup. But I think Bellinger's a little better of a choice. But you go all righties because again, Dozier, an AL guy. David Price has been only in the AL his whole, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Boston. So there's a lot of familiarity there with Dozier. Same with Machado. You need to keep him in the game. David Freese, I think he's just a professional hitter. You need to keep him in. Kemp hit a home run last night. I think you keep him in. So I think really the only change here is Cody Bellinger for Kike Hernandez. And then you can bring in Kike whenever you want, or he's that guy on the bench that if you need any position to be filled, some guy gets hurt, Kike comes in.
He's your utility guy.
Exactly. And I think you keep Austin Barnes in at catcher because although Grandal played better last night, Grandal just has been a little sketchy behind the plate. Bob Barnes made some great blocks. He's still been hitting the ball good, and Grandal really hasn't found his groove at the plate yet. So I think you go with Austin Barnes against the lefty too. There's one more person that was. Oh, and then Chris Taylor's hit pretty well in the playoffs this year too. So there's I think my only thing is Kike Hernandez probably should be subbed for another lefty outfielder just to keep the guys honest. Still, David Price is he's been not the best pitcher in the playoffs. So to stack all righties against him and kind of I just think even all righties it might be a little easier for a pitcher because you're like, okay, well, I have to just make all my pitches toward righty batters and not lefties. But what did you think about the lineup?
I was a little surprised. I did not know that was a first ever.
I didn't know
in the World
either.
Series.
What's funny is there's been a lot of weird firsts in these playoffs. Brock Holt getting the first cycle in the playoffs.
Right.
Like what? There really wasn't a cycle ever in the playoffs, and there really never has been
a late 1800s.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that was kind of weird too. And they said there's been lineups where there's been all right-handed batters that bat, But this was the first time where there was no switch hitters.
Right, true. That's why I said true. Right
exactly. So let's say Yasmani Grandal was in the lineup in this game. That wouldn't have been the same thing because Grandal is a switch hitter. Right. So, very interesting. Very cool stat there.
Yeah, no, it was. And I agree with it. I think that's the right thing that you have to do because obviously these managers are scouting and they're sitting, hey, we're trying to get our best lineup on there out in the field. I'm a little skeptical sometimes if sometimes there's like over scouting or compensating, you know what I mean? And you're thinking too much as opposed to just saying, I'm going to put my best players out there, not necessarily maybe the best lineup for that particular pitcher that we're facing, right? And I think that's the point that you were trying to make as well is let's put the best 9 batters out there, right? We have nothing to lose anymore. This is it. This is for all the marbles. So we need to put our best 9 batters out there, not necessarily the best 9 for the particular pitcher that we're facing. So I think that's the kind of back and forth that.
Well, I do think there's matchups, and Dozier and Machado had the best matchup. Obviously, Machado's going to be in the lineup, but it's really Brian Dozier getting in there and having familiarity with Chris Sale, and the Dodgers really not having a pure second baseman, so you can kind of put anybody in that spot. But so I didn't mind that, but I agree with you. You need to put matchups make sense,
right?
But you also need to put the best lineup out there. You can't just put all righties. And I think Dozier makes sense. But let's say Kike Hernandez, maybe even Chris Taylor didn't make sense as much. But it'll be interesting. All right, so
2 things really quick. I know we're running out of time. 2 things. Who's going for the Dodgers tonight? Who's pitching?
It's gonna be Hyun-Jin Ryu.
Hyun-Jin Ryu. Yeah. Okay. And who wins Game 2?
Well, here's the thing. I say we go because I know our next podcast. We'll do a little interesting thing here. I want to get your take on this first. So, by our next podcast, either we're going to be talking about whoever won the series because any team can still win the series, or we're going to be talking about Game 7 like we did last year because World Series are always on Wednesdays. So, Jared, I'll ask you this question: give me your prediction about Game 2, but also let the listeners know. Will we be talking about a celebration, or will we be talking about Game 7?
Dodgers going to win Game 2 because David Price is on the mound, and because I don't feel that David Price is good enough. He's going to give up runs. If the Dodgers have an opportunity to win a game and steal a game in Boston, this is.
I equate this also to the Yankee series when Price blew it and in Fenway gave away a game 2. Yeah.
This is the Dodgers' opportunity right now to get things back to 0. If they go down 0-2 and have to go home. It's not going to be good. So, Dodgers win tonight. Next Wednesday when we come on the podcast, series is over. We're talking about a Boston Red Sox.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to agree. I think the Dodgers win. And I actually think this is more of a pretty even pitching matchup because Hyun-Jin Ryu kind of blew his last start. So, I think both these guys are coming in not as and Price hasn't pitched horrible besides that first game too, but still
not as confident.
Exactly. He's still been super sketchy. I do think the Dodgers win. I think this series is a lot more even than people think. And I think, like I said, I don't think the Dodgers lose back-to-back games this World Series. I am going to disagree with the fact that I think there will be a Game 7. I just don't know at this point who's going to win. I know people hate when people do that, but to me, I see this going back and forth. I see it going 2-2. I see the Dodgers and Red Sox. I see the Dodgers winning Game 6 and stuff like that. So, you know what? I'll give a prediction. I think Kershaw finally gets over the hump and plays a huge role in Game 7, and I think the Dodgers win in 7. Woo! Because I think Kershaw, I hope it happens. Because if it doesn't happen, Dodgers got made. I mean, you almost got to do something with Kershaw if he doesn't pitch well. But I think he'll finally come through. He'll be big, like he was in Game 7 last year. I think David Roberts will make the right decisions. We'll be talking about a Game 7 next week. Obviously, we'll have more of a full prediction next week. Or we'll have a full analysis next week. But, yeah, so for our World Series coverage, this is pretty much it besides a Game 7 next week or analysis of what happened. Hopefully for my Dodgers, biasly, homerly, they win the freaking World Series. Hopefully they win in 5, and or maybe hopefully they win Tuesday, so we get the morning after, and we get the World Series. But nonetheless, It's gonna be a great series. I love the fact Dodgers are playing in Fenway. It's such a weird look. The Dodgers never play in Fenway, so I like that. And seeing the Red Sox play in Dodger Stadium will be kind of strange.
It was Kershaw's first time ever pitching in Fenway as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, a lot of firsts.
Yeah, a lot of firsts. So so that's it for our World Series coverage for today. We're gonna jump into the NFL next segment. We got a lot to talk about, a lot of stories. So don't miss that. We're going to break here on the Cover 2 podcast.
You exchanged words with Malcolm Jenkins. You want to explain what that was about?
No.
Does it have anything to do with the disagreement about the Players Coalition?
He's a sellout.
Why do you say that?
Because he's a sellout. Yes.
What did he say?
Specifically to you to get this now?
No, his actions speak louder than his words.
One thing we know is that the Oakland Raiders will be willing to trade almost anyone on the roster, and they just traded a huge piece. Amari Cooper, their first-round pick, star receiver, is headed to the Dallas Cowboys in exchange for a first-round pick.
Welcome back to the Cover 2 podcast, second segment of the day. Switching topics, jumping to the NFL, and we have a lot to get into.
Yes.
We have a big-time trade by my Dallas Cowboys. We have a potential trade with a star player of the Arizona Cardinals.
Sad.
We have a big time, or not a big time, but somewhat of a scuffle going on between Malcolm Jenkins and Eric Reid.
Mm-hmm.
And
play the game, Jared?
We're playing the game.
We got to play the game to start the segment.
Did Le'Veon Bell show up to the Steelers training camp?
No, he did not. And Jared,
not training camp, to the Steelers facility.
No, he did not. Once again, even though there's been rumors every week that he's going to show up. Jared, what was your guess again? You're getting pretty close, man, with this guess.
I told you. I think I said week 10.
Is this week? This is week 8 or week 9?
This is going to be week 8.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
So yeah, no, I said week 10. We're getting pretty close.
I think you're almost right. Yeah, I've been wrong in every single guess. I'm just gonna keep guessing this week until they get it, and I'll be like, I got it right. No, but everybody knows I got it wrong. Yeah, I mean, Le'Veon didn't show up. Is there anything we want to taltalk about with that?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the guy's not going to show up until he has to. Why would he
have to
risk his
injury? The Steelers
are
winning games without him too. It's not like he I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of leverage right now either, so he should show up when he can.
Yeah, no, he's not going to show up.
If they was terrible and James Conner was not playing well, but James Conner, like I mentioned last week, has very similar stats to Le'Veon Bell. So, or at least Le'Veon Bell's stats last year. So, I don't know. I mean, we'll say, I'm guessing week 10 now too at this point because I think you were right and you were right on the money.
He will show up
with that guess.
Right when he has to.
Yep.
Let's move on though. Big time trade with the Dallas Cowboys and the Oakland Raiders. John Gruden continues to trade away his star players. Obviously, Khalil Mack gets traded for basically the farm, and the Chicago Bears take on Khalil Mack. And now, former first-round pick of the Oakland Raiders, Amari Cooper, arguably their best receiver, gets traded to the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys are sending back a 2019 first-round draft pick. I just want to start this one off. When I first saw this trade and I saw it on the ticker, all I saw was Amari Cooper traded to the Cowboys. And I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty excited right now.
You guys got your guy.
I'm pretty excited.
Yeah.
And then I saw, because I knew the Raiders were asking for a first-round pick, so in the back of my head, I was like, wait a minute, what did we give up, right? And then I saw that we gave up a first-round pick, and it's kind of like, whew, okay, all right. So it took a little time to digest, and I was kind of going back and forth and thinking, is Amari Cooper worth a first-round pick? And there's a lot of different scenarios that you can kind of sit here and dissect. And at the end of the day, Amari Cooper is not Antonio Brown. Amari Cooper is not Odell Beckham Jr. Amari Cooper is not Julio Jones. Amari Cooper can be a number one receiver in this league if he's in the right offense.
He's a top 20 receiver for sure.
He is.
Yeah.
His first 2 years, he put up back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving years, and he made the Pro Bowl twice. Last year, he had somewhat of a down year, and this year he's been up and down. He's had 200-yard receiving games so far this year, but it's been somewhat of a struggle in John Gruden's new offense. So hopefully he can come in and give the Cowboys a spark. A lot of people are somewhat upset because the Cowboys gave up a first-round pick, and we all know how valuable those picks are. For Dallas, everyone and their mother knows that this team needs a better receiving core, right? And obviously when you release Dez Bryant and now Cole Beasley, your slot receiver, is your best receiver, that is not a successful lineup to have necessarily. So I think the Cowboys, this was more about just right now. Obviously, they're trying to win games now, knowing that the division is still wide open. But I think the Cowboys, and especially their scouting department, came in and said, hey, listen, we're looking at this next crop of receivers coming into the NFL next year, coming out of college, and there's no, dynamite number one receiver that we can go after. So I think the Cowboys said it's worth us giving up a first-round pick for Amari Cooper because he is their first-round pick. He's still only 24 years old. This is his 4th year in the league. So he's not that much older than the rest of the Cowboys receivers right now. And he still has a lot of upside and potential, right? It's not like he's 28, 29, teetering on that 30-year mark, and he's kind of on the downhill. He still has a lot of uphill to go. Upside, I'm sorry. So in the end, I think this was a good trade for the Cowboys. Now they have to capitalize on it because there's not really any more excuses of the Cowboys don't have a receiver to throw to, right? You have the running back. Your offensive line is still good. It's not great. It's not what what used to be. Obviously, there's injuries and that type of thing. But now you have a legit number one receiver that Dak Prescott can throw to, along with Cole Beasley and Michael Gallup, who is starting to show signs of being a good receiver. So now the Cowboys have a bye week this week, and I think that's another reason why they made this trade, was to give Amari Cooper an extra week to prepare. Obviously, he's not going to know the entire offense, but at least, it's not like, the Cowboys have to play a game this week, and he's basically scrambling to learn the playbook.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hear any more excuses now. I'm not saying he's going to come out and automatically put up a 100-yard game and the Cowboys are going to score 40, 50 points. But I think this offense needs to start to show improvements immediately. Nick, what do you think?
Well, yeah, we'd heard rumors about this, obviously, Cooper possibly going to the Cowboys for at least about 2 weeks now. What's funny is I was learning about all the Cardinals trade stuff, and then someone went, well, Cooper just went for a first pick, so I guess, and then I'm like, wait, what? And I don't know, usually I get these updates on my phone, I didn't get it, but nonetheless, Cooper traded the Cowboys for a first-round pick. I kind of had a similar reaction. I kind of took a double take when I saw it was for a first-round pick. And that's only, but I actually think drafting a guy like Amari Cooper, trading for a guy like Amari Cooper is worth a first-round pick. Because if you look at going into a draft, there's a lot of wide receivers that end up not panning out at all. They are drafted in the first round. Or take a while to develop, and a lot of times in the NFL you can't have guys take a while to develop. So I wasn't necessarily mad. I wasn't necessarily disappointed in the Cowboys for trading the first round pick because I think you can't go draft a guy that's better than Amari Cooper this next year. There's nobody in college football right now that, at least I think, in my opinion, is better than Amari Cooper's skills. The weird thing about it though is the NFL for some reason is starting to turn to the NBA where like first round picks are getting thrown out at every single player. And this was all started by the Bears, by trading 2 first-round picks for Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack's great, but before that trade, Khalil Mack, he really... I don't know if one guy is worth 2 stud draft picks. I think one guy is always worth 1 stud draft pick, especially a guy that's played in the NFL and had some success. But I don't necessarily agree on 2 first-rounders. So I think that Amari Cooper going for a first-round pick is more of a trend in the NFL, not necessarily, an indictment on other guys' characters. We're going to talk about a trade a little bit later of a guy that was not necessarily traded for a top-round, draft pick. But no, I think this is more. The Cowboys gave away a first-round. Well, the Cowboys aren't trying to rebuild, so they don't need a first-round pick. Okay, the Cowboys are trying to win right now. That's why they have Dak Prescott. That's why they have Ezekiel Elliott. That's why they have one of the best lines in all of football. Whatever the RKJ man wants to say on our first podcast, the Cowboys still got one of the best lines in football. The defense is solid enough to get to the playoffs. And I think now the one thing everyone was saying was, the Cowboys offense, they don't really have receivers. Well, now they have a good receiver. They don't have to rely on a scat back in Cole Beasley. So I love this trade from the Cowboys. I think the first-round pick thing is more of a trend. I don't think that's the Cowboys giving up too much. I think Cooper will make an instant impact on this team. And I think you had the NFC East sucks. Okay, the Cowboys had to do something. I mean, the Giants, if they would have beat Atlanta, they probably wouldn't be trading all these guys they're trading right now, because they would still have a chance, right? Now they lost, and they're probably going to be last place in the division, but still, I could see Washington probably needs to make a move. Eagles. The Eagles might need to make a move. So the Cowboys right now, I think they're the front runner to win the NFC East now after this trade. So I know all these rosters in the NFC East are a little sketchy. Dallas is the only one that's improved just by making a trade. So I love this trade from the Cowboys.
Yeah, no, the thing is, this division is still wide open, other than the Giants basically putting up the white flag in Week 8 and trading away some of their players for draft picks for next year. But no, you're right. The Washington Redskins right now have a 2-game lead on the division. The Philadelphia Eagles sit in second place, and the Cowboys are in third place. If the Cowboys would have beat Washington this past Sunday, they'd be in first place right now. So that's how close this division is. And it's probably going to come down to Week 16 or Week 17 based on how these teams are playing so far. So you're right. The Cowboys, just like the Eagles did the year before when they traded for, got Alshon Jeffrey and basically AJ Ajayi, right, and all these guys, the Cowboys are saying, hey, listen, we can't sit back and just rely on the draft anymore. We need to make a move. We need to win right now. Jason Garrett's job is on the line, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to this. This isn't just about the talent on the field. This is about the coaching staff. Because if this team doesn't do well, if this Dallas Cowboys team does not perform and make the playoffs, more than likely, a lot of people are going to be losing their jobs, including Jason Garrett.
If they don't if they don't make the playoffs after trading for a guy like Amari Cooper, fixing one of their major problems, then it's a coaching thing, right? If you can't get the talent to play up to their talent, it's a coaching thing. If the talent isn't performing, then sometimes you look at it and be like, okay, well, these guys just really aren't that good. You know what I'm saying? If a guy isn't playing well for Bill Belichick, probably isn't Bill Belichick's thing. It's probably that guy's talent, right? So I agree with you on that. I think the Cowboys are in win-now mode, and that's why first-round picks aren't necessarily important, because they've had first-round picks, and they've drafted guys, and they're still in a rut, right? They're still having an average year. So first-round picks aren't as important for teams that are trying to win now. Let's move on to my Cardinals. Totally, completely different situation than the Cowboys. Obviously, in the NFC West, there is a team that's whooping everybody's ass and dominating the division. So the Cardinals, they weren't in it from essentially week 2. But now, after a disastrous and horrible loss, embarrassing loss, one of the worst losses I've seen as a Cardinals fan, to the Denver Broncos, Patrick Peterson, there's strong rumors that he wants to get traded before the October 30th deadline. As a Cardinals fan, I hate this, but I also understand this. And I was actually saying this internally to people I know. I hadn't said it on the podcast yet. I was saying, well, if this season goes to crap, maybe you try a quick rebuild and you trade your best players. And obviously there's no better player than Patrick Peterson. So I kind of saw this on the horizon. Another thing real quick, if people think this is not real. There's been a couple times the last couple of years where there's been trade rumors that have come out about Patrick Peterson. Peterson will go on Twitter and go, this is some BS. None of this is true. I don't know who's coming up with this. He hasn't done that this time. He stayed quiet. He hasn't said anything on Twitter. And he hasn't been going to the Cardinals functions, the charity stuff recently. So I think this is real. And I think he did probably voice to management, because I don't think a lot of people respect this coaching staff right now, that, hey, can you guys trade me? Because this is getting ridiculous. I don't want to be part of another rebuild. And so I understand it, and we're just talking about Khalil Mack went for 2 first-round picks. Amari Cooper went for a first-round pick. This is boding well for the Cardinals, all right? I think Patrick Peterson is somewhere in the middle of those two. And I think the Cardinals absolutely need to get a first-round pick for him, maybe even more. You could debate that he's just as valuable as Khalil Mack on a team, because he's a shutdown corner, in my opinion, a top 3 corner in the league. So I think, and you see Marcus Peters was traded for first-round picks and stuff. So I think this is boding well for the Cardinals if they do want to trade him. But it's definitely the end of an era. And I think the Cardinals do need to think about a quick rebuild. Fitzgerald probably needs to get traded unless he wants to stay. But yeah, I think this needs to be a quick rebuild. I think you need to trade as many guys as you possibly can, a lot like the New York Giants started to do. and make this so that Josh Rosen doesn't have 3 or 4 horrendous seasons, right? You want to turn this around quick, surround him with guys, rebuild the defense, because for some reason our coach thought that changing our defense from a 3-4 man to the complete opposite thing in a 4-3 zone would be good, and they'd make the playoffs doing that. So I think you need to start building up those kind of guys, those kind of 4-3 zone personnel guys. There are some great defenders in the draft coming up. So I think you do a quick rebuild. I do think you do trade Patrick Peterson, but it's sad as a Cardinals fan to see that it's got to this point.
Yeah, it is, and I totally agree with you. I think from Patrick Peterson's standpoint, listen, he's proven on the field what he's worth, right? I'm pretty sure he's been a Pro Bowler ever since he entered the league.
He literally, every year.
The kid's, he's still a lockdown corner, right? He's been in the league for 7 years now, so he's not a young pup, but he's still in his prime, his later prime, right? But the kid can still ball. He can still play 3, 4, 5 years.
Well, he's still better than most of the corners.
He is.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree. I think he definitely commands a first-round pick. If team that would trade for him is going to give up either a first-round pick and another draft pick, like a 3rd or a 4th or something like that, or a first-round draft pick and another player. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be more than Amari Cooper, like you mentioned. I don't think you're going to get 2 first-round picks.
No, I don't think so either. The Khalil Mack thing was a little over the top. I think that was, it helped Amari Cooper. It's probably going to help Patrick Peterson. But nonetheless, I thought that was, the Khalil Mack thing was a little crazy. And the Raiders, they're just out of sorts. Right now. But, I'll ask you this. Who do you think are top of the line teams to get Patrick Peterson? Because obviously you probably need to have a first round pick. The Cardinals aren't going to be trading him to a team. They don't care who wins the Super Bowl this year. They want their draft. They want a future for their team. So who do you see as a team that has a first round pick that the Cardinals could possibly trade?
So before I pick the realistic teams that I think he could go to, the team that Patrick Peterson should be going to, if they had a first-round pick, is the New Orleans Saints.
Okay, yeah, and that's the funny thing, too, because I forgot they didn't have it. They traded in Marcus Davenport.
They traded for Marcus Davenport in this last year's draft. Patrick Peterson played at LSU, right? So that would almost be like a perfect pairing.
Well, they already made the move, though, too.
Right.
Already made the move.
Yeah, and the Saints are really good. So I think that would have been the perfect fit for Patrick Peterson, and I think for the Saints defense. But that is more than likely out of the picture unless the Saints want to give up a 2020 first-round pick, which I don't think they want to do. So I think I'll throw out a couple teams. This one I don't like. This is just the biased Jared coming out, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Philadelphia Eagles. I think they need definitely corner help. They have a couple good corners, but I don't think they have any great corners. And I think Patrick Peterson, to go along with that Eagles front seven, which is really, really good, would just bolster that defense really well. I would say the Minnesota Vikings, I think, would be in play there. I think that division is still kind of wide open as well. So the Vikings, coming into this season, had the number 1 ranked defense last year. And this year, they've gotten torched a lot.
Yeah, imagine that. Imagine if we started the season saying, okay, so the Vikings are going to have this defense, and they're going to add Patrick Peterson.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost, so I would say those 2 teams, I think he stays. Even though the Cardinals probably wouldn't want this, I think he stays in the NFC, in the NFC, as opposed to going to the AFC. So I'm going to pick either Minnesota or the Eagles, I think, as the 2 teams right there. Carolina, you could probably throw Carolina in there because Carolina's sitting at 4-2 right now. They're right behind New Orleans for second in the NFC South. Carolina doesn't really have a star corner, even though our man.
Well, they got a 3-time Pro Bowler.
Yeah, and James Bradbury, who's never been to the Pro Bowl in his life. This is blasphemous. So I think Carolina. So there's a couple teams, but it all depends on what they're willing to give up, right? The Cardinals are in a position right now where they don't have a whole lot of leverage because they're last in their division. Everyone knows that they're not going anywhere.
Well, everyone knows their pick is going to be top 3. Too.
Right. So if you're another team trading for Patrick Peterson, even though you're getting a great talent, you can sit there and say, hey, maybe, right, obviously he's worth a first-round pick, but why would you be asking for more? So I think it'll be very interesting. If the Cardinals have any type of class, I think they do try to way to get this trade done for Patrick Peterson's sake. Of course, I'm sure they would love to keep him and continue to build around him, but understanding that this team has been bad for the last couple years and that Patrick Peterson is, listen, He's still in the prime of his career. He wants to win. Larry Fitzgerald has stayed with his team throughout, and I'm not saying that Patrick Peterson wouldn't, but I think they have to understand that, listen, this guy's a special talent, and we want to do what's best for him. We're not going anywhere this year. Let's try to get him a new home. Let's try to get him to win some games.
Well, also, I think, here's the other thing. If he asks for a trade him. You know what? Because you don't want that guy that said, I don't want to play for this team, and then keep him after the deadline, right? Because then then it's a little weird, and I don't know where his contract is necessarily at this point. I don't know how many years he has left, but it's like, make him look bad, right? If he wants to get traded, trade him. The Cardinals aren't making the playoffs this year. It's not like he's just being a disgruntled employee. There's a reason he wants to get traded, and I think the Cardinals should trade him. And like I said, if your management, make him look bad. Make him look like the guy that wanted to jump ship and didn't like the team anymore. Don't keep him on the team as a power move. I don't like that at all. Another team I think, and I want to get your opinion on this really quick because we don't have a lot of time left and we have one more thing we want to talk about. But Pittsburgh Steelers. You think this could be a possible team? I know they have Joe Hayden, and Joe Hayden's not in his prime anymore, but man, if they added Patrick Peterson, that would really bolster their defense and they're a team. Obviously, they're going to gain Le'Veon Bell. Imagine if you gained Le'Veon Bell and Patrick Peterson. The Steelers would become a force alongside the Chiefs and the Patriots here in the AFC.
Wow. That's interesting. I didn't really think about that, and I'm just looking at the
I don't know
standings.
if they have a first-round pick. Obviously,
They do.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the standings right now, and Pittsburgh is sitting in first place because of that tie that they had.
Also, Cincinnati disappointed severely against the Chiefs.
The Chiefs are just the Chiefs. I mean, come on.
Chiefs are so good.
But that's actually a really, really good point. You're right. Joe Hayden is a good corner, but he's just not. He's not the guy he used to be. And really, the way that the Pittsburgh Steelers play defense is they try to not let anything get behind their secondary. But they just don't have any ball hawks. They play more of a zone blitzing scheme. So there's just not a whole lot of opportunity for their corners to make those types of plays. They get tackles and
so you're saying they wouldn't necessarily be the best fit for...
I agree with you on that. The best fit because I think Patrick Peterson is more of a man-to-man corner.
You're right.
And
You're
I think the Pittsburgh Steelers defense plays a lot of zone covers. Now, I'm not saying that Patrick Peterson can't do that. I think he's a great enough talent that he can adjust and adapt to just about any defense there is out there. But I think if you're trying to play to Patrick Peterson's real strengths, I think you send him to a team that plays a good amount of man defense where he can just travel with the other team's best receiver for the entire game and say, hey, listen, guys, I got this part of the field locked down. You guys handle the other half.
Yeah, no, true. I forgot about that sake. That one of the reasons he also wants to leave is because he does not fit in well in this Cardinals defense, too, which is funny because he's 6-time Pro Bowler as a Cardinals defender. All right, let's move on to Eric Reid-Malcolm Jenkins. Before the game, I don't think any of us saw this coming. You have a coin toss, and you have two of the most outspoken guys about, the same injustices that Colin Kaepernick is talking about. The same guys, two of the guys, they're still kneeling here in the NFL. And then they almost fight at the coin toss, and it's a very strange thing. And you see it, and Eric Reid's going crazy on the side.
Did you see his eyes?
Yeah, he's going crazy on the sidelines.
He looked like a man possessed.
Yeah, and so I didn't like this at all because I think it makes those guys' case. Although I agree with them on what they're saying, it doesn't look good for their case.
You know who
right?
this helps?
Who's
the NFL?
Well, no, it does, and that's what I was thinking too. You have guys, a lot of times you look at teams, and teams that are infighting, you go, okay, well, they're not going to end up making it to the end, right? Teams that are infighting aren't going to win the championship because they can't even figure out their own locker room. The teams that are gelled, they're all friends, they're all cool. Those are the teams that win, right? You see the Red Sox, for example. Very, very gel very well. The Dodgers aren't necessarily dysfunctional, but they don't gel as well as the Red Sox. I think when you look at this side, there's a dysfunctional side to that, and the fact that two of the guys, they're some of the biggest names in this whole thing, are trying to fight each other at midfield during the coin toss, and Eric Reid comes out and says it's because he thinks Malcolm Jenkins, he did this for his own foundation and all this stuff I don't know anything about. Jared, what's your take on this whole thing? I thought this was a terrible look for Eric Reid, Malcolm Jenkins, and Colin Kaepernick's case. Although I agree with it, I don't think this is a very good look for it. And I think it's a great look for the NFL.
It makes the NFL's case stronger.
Yeah, not a great look for the NFL,
right.
But yeah, you're right.
It makes the NFL's case stronger as to why this needs to be, in their case, nipped in the bud. I didn't see the beginning of this, so I don't know who technically started this, but I think this looks worse for Eric Reid, right?
Yeah.
You're a guy who has all the talent in the world to be a starting safety in this league. Coming out of LSU, you made the Pro Bowl for the 49ers, and then obviously everything happens, and you end up, siding and backing Colin Kaepernick, and NFL teams decide to not sign you, even though you are clearly one of the best talented free agent players
definitely
on the market,
worthy of being on an NFL
and
roster.
worthy of being on an NFL team. No question about it, right? I'm not saying that this helps Malcolm Jenkins' case, but Malcolm Jenkins has been on an NFL roster his entire career. He never got cut and was out looking for a job because of this. So for Eric Reid, who just got signed a couple weeks ago, this isn't a good look. You kind of have to tread water a little bit, walk on eggshells a little bit, and you're obviously you can stand for what's right and what you believe in, but to stir the pot like this, I don't think was the best look.
No.
Right? And like I said, for Malcolm Jenkins, I don't know anything about what Eric Reid was saying as far as, you're a sellout and you're only doing this for yourself, and you're trying to, you're saying one thing, but then you're doing another thing. That's basically what Eric Reid was saying. So I don't know anything as far as that goes, but it just it's not a good look for Eric Reid because, listen, he only signed a 1-year deal, and I'm sure it wasn't for a whole lot of money. So if the Carolina Panthers think that he is going to be a distraction for this team, I'm pretty sure there's no hesitation in them releasing him.
Yeah,
and then he's going to be out on the street. And
exactly.
I probably guarantee you that no other team would want to pick him up.
That's the thing, too. You get signed, right? And after all this BS and nobody signed you, and he filed a grievance against the Bengals that didn't go through, and the NFL, whoever sided with him. But, dude, you get signed, right? And everyone's like, okay, well, let's see if he kneels and causes a distraction. And the second week you're on the team, you cause a distraction, you try to fight another guy. Like, come on. That is just, you're not playing as smart, right? You got signed. You can kneel, whatever you want to do all that stuff, say whatever you want in the post-game press conferences. But what it looked like now, to me, was Eric Reid, almost signed with a team just to cause trouble or something like that. Or almost he signed because he knew they'd play the Eagles and he'd be able to confront Malcolm Jenkins. Like, I was thinking about that even. It's like, did Eric Reid actually just sign with the Panthers so that he'd have this confrontation with Malcolm Jenkins at halftime or at the beginning of the game because he knows he probably won't see him in the streets anytime soon? So, I don't know, you're right. I think also, we're talking about, trades, Patrick Peterson going anywhere. Let's say the Panthers get Patrick Peterson. Patrick Peterson could probably reel him in because they're former LSU teammates and stuff like that. So, but yeah, you're right. If the Panthers don't want to deal with that, because the Panthers are a great team this year, and they were a good team without Eric Reid before they signed him too. So he's got to watch it and not do this kind of stuff because the kneeling makes sense. And the outspokenness in the press conference makes sense. But you calling out another, social justice warrior player and saying he's a sellout and all this stuff, and he's not, that is not what the NFL wants to see, and that's not what NFL teams want to see. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what it ends up playing out with him. But I think he'll reel it in. I don't think this will be a problem anymore. I think this is a one-time thing with Malcolm Jenkins. But like I said, he's got to watch out because these teams, nobody wanted to sign him in the first place, and then you're going to come in and do this first 2-3 weeks. That's not a good look.
No, not at all. Not at all. So just like I said, just take it easy a little bit. Listen, continue to stand up for what you believe in, and that is all great and well. But don't be starting fights and trying to make the NFL look worse because I guarantee you Roger Goodell was on the phone with the Panthers owner saying, I don't like this at all, and if this continues, you make something happen, right?
You made it not about football.
Right.
And you turned what was, a peaceful protest and then playing football into peaceful protest and then unpeaceful protest. So it's like, that's where it starts to get a little sketchy. All right, we need to go to break. We need to play Do You Care? We got a lot to talk about in that segment. We're going to continue more NFL talk in Do You Care? So if you didn't get your NFL fix today, we got a little bit more and some good stuff coming up there. All right, we're going to break also a little bit later. We're going to be talking about the Lakers and Rockets brawl and the college football season coming up. So this is the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
David Bell introduced by the Cincinnati Reds on Monday, so too Brad Ausmus by his new team, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Thank you to all the fans for supporting me for 9 incredible years. Thank you for supporting the team and the Ducks organization for 25 seasons. And thank you for making tonight the most memorable night of my life. Thank you very much.
Chad Kelly making an appearance in an Arapahoe County courtroom this morning after being arrested very early this morning. It was around 1 o'clock this morning for criminal trespassing.
Welcome back to the show. Jared, you know what time it is right now?
What time is it, Nick?
It's time for Do You Care? Care. It's time for Do You Care? Jared, our favorite game here on the podcast. If you don't know how to play it, well, you don't actually get to play it if you're listening. But, I mean, you can play along if you want, but we're not going to be able to hear your answers. But this is how we play the game. We give each other a host of questions, and we tell you whether we care or not. And then we kind of explain why we asked the question, because a lot of times it's just a way to talk about a topic that we don't get to talk about one of the segments because we have a time restriction. So, enough of that insider information. Jared, like usual, you get the first question. Do you care that the NCAA basketball top 10 AP poll came out this week?
I don't care about the poll. I do care that college basketball is coming back. I love college basketball. Great time of the year. This is one of the best times of the year. You have the World Series. You have the NBA just starting. This is going on into their second week. You have the NFL about to be mid-season. College basketball is about to start. So there's
football too.
And of course there's college football right now. So there's so many things going on. Best time of the sports year for sure. But the rankings and the standings, I mean, listen, the last couple of years there's been so many flips and ups and downs. And I mean, I know last year Duke was ranked number 1 in the preseason polls. And they started out hot the first couple weeks, and then they tanked a little bit, you know. So it's like, really, March Madness is obviously fantastic, and I can't wait for that. But these preseason polls, to me, don't mean too much because I don't care if you're number 1, you're going to lose, right? Throughout the 30 or 40 game season, however long it is, you're going to lose at least a couple times. So these preseason rankings, to me, don't mean too much. I'm just excited for college basketball to finally start and get started and then, you know, get into the conference play. That's when things really get started. The first couple weeks are more like exhibition games and you're playing out of conference and that type of thing. But when the conference games start, that's when basketball really gets going. Nick, do you care that Denver Broncos backup quarterback, Chad Kelly, was arrested early yesterday morning?
No, I don't care because I'm not a Denver Broncos fan. But this is just, I mean, could you not have called this probably like 3-4 years ago? We were talking about this during one of the breaks on the show today. Chad Kelly is not had the best past, better past than some, but obviously he I forget the school he was at before he ended up at Ole Miss again, but
it was like Eastern Mississippi State,
something like
community
that.
college.
Yeah. Well, even before that, because obviously I think he ended up transferring there. But he was on the first season of Last Chance U, the show on Netflix about community college players and specific major community college football teams that dominate kind of the sport. Chad Kelly was on there. Then there was, he ended up with Ole Miss. Fiery player, talked a lot of crap. There was video that came out of him fighting high school kids for his brother during a high school. It just, he hasn't had the best past. He somehow survived in the NFL, and it was looking like, I believe it was the game against the Chiefs, if I'm not mistaken. Chad Kelly might come into the game for Broncos because Case Keenum just has not played up to his contract and up to his standards so far. So there was that, hey, you might see Chad Kelly come in. He's a fiery player. He's going to play really hard. I think, and then the Broncos obviously destroyed my Arizona Cardinals. So I think that held off from Chad Kelly playing even in that game too, because Case Keenum looked really good. But now he gets arrested. And I don't necessarily know what the arrest was. It doesn't really matter, to be honest. The fact that he even got arrested means he was involved with something, right? And his sketchy past does not help. So I hope it's not a serious offense and he can still play, because I think it'd be fun to watch him as a Broncos player. But I'm not necessarily surprised that this has happened to him. And I think if you're a Bronco fan, just one of the caveats of bringing one of those guys onto a roster, stuff might happen. So be interesting to see what happens with him. But his future in the NFL might be limited if this is a serious offense. Jared, sticking with the NFL, do you care that the New York Giants traded Eli?
I do care, but it's not the Eli that you're thinking.
Yep.
I know Nick had that one, trying to be sneaky there. Eli Manning is still with the Giants, and typically I would kind of hate that scenario. But for how poorly Eli Manning has played, I hope he stays with the Giants the rest of the year. So
I think he should stay there the rest of his career.
It's an easy win for the Cowboys when they do play them again. But going back to this particular question, the Giants are horrible. They're sitting at 1-6 and last in the NFC East. And they are now having a fire sale. 2 days ago, they traded corner Eli Apple to the New Orleans Saints. And just early this morning, they traded defensive tackle Damian Snacks Harrison, the big 300, close to 400-pound defensive tackle, to the Detroit Lions. They got draft picks as compensation for both of those players. And basically, they're realizing, hey, listen, we aren't going to do anything this year. Let's basically gear up for the draft and for next year, and let's put our young guys on the field this year and see what we have. So from a management standpoint, it's the smart thing to do for this team. Obviously, they came into the season having higher expectations. And the interesting thing about this is, you just signed Odell Beckham Jr. to a huge contract. So are you in quick rebuild, or is this going to be a 3-4 year rebuild? Because if this is, I don't think Odell Beckham Jr. wants to be a part of this, right? You have him, you have Saquon Barkley, you have talent on this football team, and they just couldn't get it done. So I'm going to continue to say this. I think they made a mistake by drafting Saquon Barkley. For as great as he's been so far, I think they should have drafted one of those top quarterbacks this year, and I think that would have set them up for success, because looking at next year's quarterback draft class, I don't see the talent that was in last year's draft. So I'm not really sure what the Giants are thinking as far as their quarterback situation going forward, because obviously Eli Manning is not their future. And if he's back with this team next year, I will be completely shocked. So I think they made the wrong move in drafting Saquon Barkley. They should have drafted a quarterback, and right now they are paying for it dearly. Nick, do you care that Paul Correa had his jersey retired with the Anaheim Ducks?
I do care, because Paul Correa was one of the first hockey players I knew, period. As a young kid, the Ducks were obviously a fun team to watch. They made the Stanley Cup in 2003, and they've pretty much been competitive ever since then. The franchise has been around since 1993. But when I was a younger kid, around 2003, it was really fun to watch that series against the New Jersey Devils, and Paul Correa was the guy. I remember I had the old school NHL video game on PlayStation 2, and I used to play, and I always used to like the Ducks. I used to like Paul Correa, and obviously Teemu Selanne and the Niedermayer brothers and Chris Pronger. They were all on the team too, and stuff like that. So it was fun to play as that guy, and it was fun to watch him. And obviously everyone kind of remembers Paul Correa is a great player. Another thing he'll be remembered for is just getting absolutely freight trained by Scott Stevens in the finals. Go up, if you haven't seen it, look up Scott Stevens hits Paul Correa. Jared, I'll show you during the break this hit, and it's devastating. I mean, it's just an old school NHL hit, and it changed Paul Correa's career. Kind of, he wasn't the same after that, but. He was a Duck. He was the original star of the Duck. He was the first draft pick ever by the Anaheim Ducks franchise. So, absolutely deserved it. Teemu Selanne's number is obviously up there, and now Paul Correa's number is up there. And I expect more and more Ducks to start getting retired, their numbers to start getting retired, because some of these guys are legends, and they deserve it for sure. So, Paul Correa deserved it. Although I'm more of a Kings fan nowadays, so I can't get my voice. But although I'm more of a Kings fan nowadays, it still is nice to see the old school Ducks get in. Anybody that deserves it deserves it. You know, whether you're a fan of the team or not. Paul Kariya deserved it, and it's very good for him. All right, Jared, do you care that the NBA G League, the Gatorade League, is going to pay high school players to play in the league for 1 year?
I do care, and this has so many different storylines to it that I'm obviously, this is Do You Care, and we give quick analysis, so I won't be able to go completely into this. I will say a couple things. For high school recruits coming out of high school and potentially going into college, this is huge, because obviously there's a lot of kids out there who want to go and have that college experience, right? You want to go to Duke, you want to go to Kentucky, you want to go to the big time major programs, make a name for yourself there, get that college experience, get that college education potentially, and then go into the NBA if you're lucky enough. Well, guess what? Now the G League is offering an alternative to go into college. You can come play for the G League for, like, I think it's $100,000 or $125,000 for the season, which obviously for a 17, 18-year-old kid is a lot of money, right? And on top of that, there's even endorsement deals going on. I forget the kid's name, but there is I think Trendon Watford. He's in a unique situation because there's an opportunity for him to make like $1 million endorsement deal, and that deal could potentially go up to like $14 or $15 million. So you have to look at it from the standpoint of, okay, I can go to college and have that college experience, or I can go to the G League for 1 year and make a lot of money before I even get to the NBA. And then if I get injured or something like that, I still have that money to fall back on, because if I tear my ACL or something in college, I'm not getting paid yet. So therefore my draft stock is going to lower, and I'm not going to get paid, and I'm going to have to, not that, you know, these players, everyone has to work hard for what they want, but you're going to have to work extra hard to get back to that level of talent that you were before. Now, if you're in the G League and you're making money, at least you have something to fall back on. So there are so many different avenues going into this, and obviously there's still a lot that needs to be worked on as far as terms and incentives and all that stuff. But this is looking like the new age for high school recruits coming out is there's not just the opportunity to go to college. There's the opportunity to basically be a semi-pro and make money and then go into the NBA. So this is a big story for not only the NBA but basketball as a whole. And moving forward, we will definitely continue to talk about this. Nick, you get the last question as usual. Do you care that the Angels hire new manager Brad Ausmus and the Reds hire new manager David Bell?
Yes, I do care about this. I care about half this question, because I don't necessarily care that David Bell was signed with the Reds, but there was more to talk about there than David Bell being the manager of the Reds. I do care about Brad Ausmus obviously being the new Angels manager. You know, as a kid, there's a lot of stuff that I grew up with that's kind of, you know, been brought back. As a kid, Mike Scioscia's been the manager of the Angels pretty much my whole lifetime, right? He's been the guy. He's been the Angels skipper. Now he let himself go from the organization, and Brad Ausmus comes in. At first, I didn't know what to think about this. I liked other candidates, and when I first heard Brad Ausmus, I was like, you know, that guy kind of failed in Detroit and kind of lost the locker room. But then I heard he was working in the Angels front office last year, and I kind of changed my mind a bit. I do like the signing, because I wanted Eric Chavez to be the manager. Chavez was in the exact same role as Ausmus in the front office, and Ausmus obviously has a lot more managerial experience and some playoff experience too. So Ausmus is the better choice. I still expect Chavez to be on the staff, but Ausmus is a good manager. I think people will respect him. Another former catcher, so the Angels can continue that former catcher-manager style, and you see a lot of that in the MLB. But I like the hire. It should be interesting to see. I think the Angels should stack a good roster around him, too, to help him out. But I think the Angels will be fine. I think this is a good hire. I don't think this is a situation where you're hoping he does well, like an Alex Cora or an Aaron Boone. I think this is more of, you know what you're going to get with this guy. You know he can make the playoffs. You can get someone deep with him, and so let's see how he plays. On the Reds case, David Bell being signed by the Reds, interesting hire. I thought it was going to be Joe Girardi, but Joe Girardi backed out, and there's rumors that he is waiting for that Cubs job. There's a lot of rumors saying that Joe Maddon has 1 year to prove himself again and to get, try to win another World Series, or he's probably out. So I think Girardi actually not accepting the Reds managerial job is more of a story here than David Bell being signed. I don't think David Bell was their first choice. But the Reds were an interesting team last year too. They ended up as one of the better teams actually in the second half. So they didn't really show their record. They were terrible with Brian Price earlier in the season, and then Jim Riggleman took them on, and they played really well. So I think this is a good roster. They're improving. They have some very good players. There still is somewhat in the rebuild, but I think having a guy, a young manager in his first ever stint, rebuild with the team might work out better. But I don't think this was their first choice. And I think the story here is more that Girardi didn't sign with them, and that they ended up having to go to second choice. So nonetheless, care more about Ausmus, don't necessarily care about the Bell deal. All right, need to go to break. We're going to go on to our last segment after this very quick break. We're going to be talking about the Lakers brawl with the Rockets, suspensions. Did he spit? Right? Did he spit? We don't know. And also, of course, college football. We're going to be predicting some of the bigger games this week. And that's on the other side of this quick break here on the Cover 2 podcast on OC Rock Radio.
And I think another technical foul's been handed out. Now Ingram looks like he's confronting Jason Phillips.
Well, the technical foul was on Ingram for shoving James Harden after that play.
I'm not sure what happened.
Ingram was usually pretty mild-mannered. It's hot now. Paul punches are thrown. Paul and Rondo throwing punches. Ingram comes in. He's throwing punches. Security trying to separate. So are some of the teammates. Boy, that quickly erupted into something ugly.
Back here on the Cover 2 podcast, final segment of the show. And this one's a jam-packed one. We're going to be talking about two different sports here. We're going to start off with the NBA and the big brawl that happened between the Lakers and the Rockets a couple days ago. And then for the end of the segment, we're going to switch to college football, talk about the rankings and some of the big-time matchups going on this weekend. But first, we're going to start off with the brawl.
Yes.
Nick, LeBron James gets his first home game as a Laker.
Yeah.
It's a loss. They lose to the Rockets. But we don't want to talk about the loss necessarily. We want to talk about the brawl and the suspensions. And if you did not see it, Brandon Ingram, for a guy that is typically very calm-mannered, very low-key, doesn't really talk a whole lot, something irked him, and he went off on James Harden, shoved him after a foul was called.
For essentially no reason.
Yeah, I went over the play a couple times, and I can't seem to find the reason why he did this. Anywho, Brandon Ingram shoves James Harden, and then Chris Paul basically comes to Harden's defense. Everyone starts to kind of huddle around together. There's a lot of words being thrown around. And then Rajon Rondo comes into the picture and gets involved with Chris Paul. And Chris Paul thinks that Rajon Rondo spits on him, so Chris Paul reacts and tries to shove Rondo back. Rondo then throws a left hook, and I think he connected.
He
connected
yeah.
with Chris Paul. He didn't give him a black eye or anything, but he connected. It started to, a mini little fight started to break out. All in all, Brandon Ingram suspended 4 games for, in a sense, initiating.
Well, okay, but here's the other thing, too. You see what Ingram did after, though? Is Ingram came in and laid a long-range Superman punch on Chris Paul.
I mean, he does have long arms.
After all that happened, though. He came back into the fray. Him and Stevenson was trying... Yeah, Lance Stevenson playing, the good guy,
peacemaker.
The sheriff in this case. Ingram got away from his reach and threw a right-handed bomb at Chris Paul. So he came back in the fight. That's why I think he ended up getting the foot, initiating it, and then also throwing an unnecessary punch and kind of being the third man in too. So, this is very interesting because obviously it didn't even start with Rondo and Paul. Rondo and Paul had nothing to do with this. It was more. What I saw this is more of a way for Rondo finally just to start talking crap to Paul. Because obviously we're hearing the comments after, and Rondo's saying nobody likes Paul. He's a terrible teammate. He's not a good guy. All the stuff. He has this squeaky clean image. And there's a lot of beef now coming between Rondo. I don't think Rondo liked Chris Paul, and I think he was going to find a way to somewhat get him irked in that game anyways, and he found his way. You know, hey, don't come over to my teammate and get involved. You're not involved. I get he pushed Harden, but what are you going to do, Chris? And then, obviously, we have this spit or no spit thing. I don't really know. I've seen the replay. You know, I don't want to be a Laker defender here, but it doesn't look like he intentionally spit at Chris. Spit might have come out of his mouth. He also has a mouth guard in, and a lot of times when you have a mouth guard in, there's a lot of spit that happens. This is kind of a disgusting thing, but like, there's a lot of things that can happen that doesn't necessarily mean a guy spit at a guy intentionally trying to incite something, right? So there is Chris Paul wiping his face and stuff like that, and Chris Paul, he did come, you know, if people want to say there's a conspiracy theory on this and say Chris Paul came up with this, he was saying it about a minute after the fight happened. So what people are saying is Chris Paul didn't get spit on, and then all of a sudden he's in the middle of it saying I got spit on a minute after the fight happened, still in the moment. So I think there was some spit that happened. I don't think it was necessarily intentional. The Lakers and Rondo went over it together, and they're coming out and saying absolutely nothing happened. So I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say he spit. I've seen the video. No, because I really haven't seen any videos that have shown definitive spitting from Rajon Rondo. I think this is more about just, you know, this Lakers team is like, we kind of saw this with these guys. I wouldn't have thought necessarily Rondo would be getting in fights. I would have thought maybe JaVale McGee, Lance Stevenson, Michael Beasley, those type of guys. But hey, this Lakers team's going to be feisty, even though they're losing games. I like that they're showing, you know, they're already kind of defending each other, right? You're seeing Rondo come in and defend Ingram and say, hey, don't touch my guy, right? Or I'm going to throw hands. And they ended up throwing hands in a legitimate brawl. This wasn't your typical NBA fight, pushing and shoving, what you going to do about it, all that stuff. No, this was whatever happened. Chris Paul put his fingers in Rajon Rondo's face, and Rondo decided to throw a left hand. So you don't see that a lot, but I thought it was good. I thought it was good for Lakers chemistry that this happened.
Listen, Rajon Rondo's a feisty guy.
Yeah.
Now he is very quiet when it comes to the media, but like behind the scenes, I mean the guys, ask Doc Rivers, right, when they were together in Boston. Doc Rivers knows all about Rajon Rondo's attitude, and I don't want to say temper, but like if you know, kind of get him going, Rajon Rondo's a feisty dude, okay? So it doesn't surprise me that this happened. And yeah, listen, you know what? I don't know if they did this because, or Brandon Ingram, in a sense, if he did this because like he had something to prove, like he wants, like, listen, LeBron James is here, and that's been the talk of the town for the last couple months. So, you know, we haven't been getting any talk, or, you know, we want to come out and show that we're tough. We're not going to get pushed around. Maybe that was the case. Because, like I said, I've looked over this tape a multitude of times now, and I just don't understand what brought Brandon Ingram to basically initiate this and push James Harden. James Harden went up for a layup, got fouled as he made the layup. Brandon Ingram kind of ran into the post and then came back, and the two walked into each other, and Brandon Ingram then decided to just literally shove.
And Harden kind of just was like, what the hell?
No, Harden put up his hands like, dude, what's going on? Like, it wasn't like it was a hard foul, like someone got like elbowed.
Yeah, and Harden didn't like get in his face after Harden didn't bump into him. This was like Harden was going back complaining about the foul like he usually does.
Yeah, like I mean, someone must have said something about Brandon Ingram's mama, because like that's the only way that I can, you know, rationalize why Brandon Ingram would have done that out of the blue. But in a sense, I think all the suspensions were warranted. I think Brandon Ingram deserved to be suspended the longest. And then Rajon Rondo and Chris Paul obviously deserved to be suspended for throwing punches and continuing to initiate the fight as well. Going, just kind of talking about this spitting or non-spitting incident for a second. And I am a Laker fan, so I'm not trying to sound like a homer. I don't think that Rajon Rondo intentionally spit on Chris Paul. I think I agree with your point. Rajon Rondo does wear a mouthpiece, and I played football. I wore a mouthpiece for years. You're going to accumulate spit in your mouthpiece. So I think because Rajon Rondo was trying to talk to Chris Paul, I think spit might have accidentally just come out of his mouth and potentially got onto Chris Paul, and I think that's what happened. They slowed down the video, obviously, and there's a camera angle right on Rajon Rondo. You don't see any, like, actual, like, a loogie or anything coming out, right?
It's just like the reaction from Paul. He wipes his face. But in my opinion, it's Paul. Was Paul just going over there kind of? He's not super rational at this point. Paul is also getting in the face of Rajon Rondo. They're talking smack to each other. This isn't Rondo inciting and being a pest. This is both these guys arguing, and then Paul kind of does one of those things, and then he pushes him in the face and stuff like that. I don't even necessarily think there might have even been spit at all. I think Paul was just kind of, he wasn't acting like himself in that situation, and he was kind of just over Rajon Rondo getting in his face, and maybe there'd been stuff said the whole game. And maybe, for all we know, we saw this with Garnett and Anthony a couple years ago. Maybe there was something really personal that Rondo brought up that Paul kind of was like, no, don't say that. I'm going to push you in the face. Something like that. So, I don't know, but I don't think there was intentional spitting. That would obviously be terrible. We're not going to advocate for that. Even as Laker fans, I'm not going to advocate for guys spitting in each other's face. But what I will advocate for is Rondo defending teammates. And I think this was a good sign for the Lakers that they already have somewhat of like chemistry with each other. They're willing to fight. They're willing to back each other up. And for this Lakers team, man, if I know I can get in a fight, full-on brawl, and only get suspended 3 games, man, if someone's going to start talking, I'm going to take those 3 games, right? If you're these hard-nosed guys, right? In the MLB for fighting, guys get a lot of games, right? There is more games to play, but these guys that charge them out and stuff like that, they get suspended like 7-8 games. The NBA, only 3 games for throwing punches. I don't think that's really that bad of a thing if a guy's really talking.
I'll tell you this, and I think this is my reasoning as why it was, in a sense, a shorter suspension for all parties involved. I think for the most part, this was like a lot of guys, especially for this year, this was everyone's first offense this year. For Brandon Ingram, I think this was his first offense ever. Yeah. I'm sure Rajon Rondo throughout his career. Right. I don't think it is, and I don't think it's Chris Paul's first time either. But for Brandon Ingram, it was. So I think, because of Rondo and Paul's history in the league and Brandon Ingram's short history of never having any real issues, I think that's why these guys got suspended a short amount. I will tell you this, if this ever happens with these guys again, they will get suspended longer. Yeah. And I think the NBA is putting everyone else on notice saying, if this happens throughout the league on a consistent basis, we will extend the suspensions, we will bump up the fines and that type of stuff. So I think this was just a benchmark and saying, listen, it's the beginning of the year, so this is kind of like a slap on the hand for you guys because of how much money they make, right? So this isn't going to hurt their wallets too bad. But if this happens again, I think you'll see an 8-game, 10-game type of suspension and a bigger fine. So, this is, luckily it's the beginning of the year, and this isn't really going to, make or break a team, obviously. But yeah, no, like you mentioned, this is guys standing up for their team, and that's going to happen probably 100 out of 100 times. Yeah. So. Yeah, no, for me it's fine. As long as Rajon Rondo doesn't, huck a loogie in anybody's face, I'm good with it, right? So, all right, let's transition completely. Let's go to college football, Jared. We have one of the bigger games of the year this year, as I mess with my seat. You have number 1 Alabama versus currently number 4 LSU. We talk a lot about LSU today. We got Odell Beckham talk, we got Eric Reid, we got Patrick Peterson. Let's talk about the real LSU. LSU Tigers, obviously 1 loss on the season, a loss to number 9 Florida. Bama, undefeated, and clearly the best team in college football. Let's talk about this game before we go into any others. This is the game of the year, along a lot of times with Ohio State, Michigan, and Auburn and Alabama. But now specifically because LSU is number 4 and has shown they can win the big game, this is huge. Now, Jared, where is this game being played? I'm not 100% sure where is it being played. So you know what? I want to correct you. This game is being played at LSU, but this game is actually next weekend.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
see, my brother gave me bad information.
I think both these teams are on a bye this week.
Okay,
we're heading into week 9 of the college football season. Week 10 is when Alabama and LSU play, and that's almost even better because both these teams get a bye. So now both of these teams are like, all right, there's no excuses. You have time to rest your players. Tua gets to rest his knee. You get that much more opportunity to scout. So there's really no excuses now. But for this week, Both of those teams are on a bye, so I'm sorry to burst everyone's bubble.
Boo.
But yeah, that game will have to be postponed until next week. Yeah. The big game or big games for this week, number 9 Florida plays number 7 Georgia in Jacksonville. That's a huge rivalry. Yeah. You got number 17 Penn State playing number 18 Iowa. So I would say those are probably the 2 biggest games on the slate for this week. You have a decent Pac-12 matchup with number 24 Stanford hosting number 14 Washington State. But for the most part, those 2 first games that I mentioned are probably the biggest ones of the week.
Well, okay, so let's change it completely. Let's talk about, there's 2 games I want to talk about that happened last week. And one of them is Washington State versus Oregon. And the other one is Michigan State. Now, we put a lot into this Michigan State game. Let's talk about Washington State and Oregon real quick. Washington State, they put a whooping on Oregon in the first half and ended up winning this game and upsetting Oregon. At least that's what I think. Jared, do you see, real quick, I remember when we were first starting this podcast, we would always be, Washington State is going to get far. They got Mike Leach, puts people in crates, and stuff like that. Do you see this Washington State team, have they turned the corner, or is this just one of these Mike Leach, lucky wins? And are we going to wait till they play Washington at the end of the season?
No, they haven't turned the corner. Okay. They've had some good wins.
Well, they play Stanford this year.
And you know what? I have to give them credit where credit is due. They've had some good wins within conference. But is Washington State going to make it to the college football playoffs and beat a Georgia or an Alabama
that'd be
or
crazy,
even a Michigan? No. So I'm not even going to waste my breath sitting here and trying to hype up Washington State, even though they had good wins. Like I said, I give them credit for beating Oregon, who was then ranked number 12, and Washington was sitting at number 25. I give them a lot of credit. They pretty much whooped them. They won by 14. They won at home. Good for them. But Washington State is not talented enough, player side or coaching-wise, to beat any one of the elite teams in college football right now. So, no, to answer your question, flat out no.
Okay. So, what do you see happening in this game? They play, obviously, a contrasting style in Stanford. Do you think this is the week where we go, oh, they got their win, and now they're going to get their loss?
Stanford gets the home game, right? So Washington State has to travel. So I think Stanford gets the edge there with the crowd noise. You're right. This is 2 contrasting styles. Washington State wants to get up and down the field. They want to air it out 50, 60 times. Stanford wants to control clock, run the ball, have 3 and outs on defense, and basically play a controlled football game. So I'm going to give this one to Stanford because they're at home, but I'm going to preface that by saying whoever starts out this game, if Washington comes out and they're able to control the ball offensively, then I think Washington has a great chance. If Stanford comes out and they set the tone by running the ball efficiently and running, having a 5-6 minute drive, something like that, which they want to do, wear Washington State's defense down, then I'm going to clearly give the edge to them. So I think this is kind of a wait and see approach, but from the outset before, I'm going to give it to Stanford.
Yeah, no, this Washington State team, and my thing is that too, if they beat Stanford, then I'm really going to be confident in them going into this Washington, because obviously they play other opponents, and if they beat Oregon, who has one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, and they go beat Stanford, who has, this style that has always worked out and has been very, very good for them in the last couple of years, then I'm going to be looking, okay, they're a pretty good team. Let's just see if they can beat Washington. And you never know. Now, the Pac-12 has been really knocked down this year. There's too many upsets. And I think clearly the Pac-12 is probably the worst Power 5 conference this year, unfortunately for us who are Pac-12 fans. It doesn't look like the college football playoff is going to, have a Pac-12 team in. Case in point, there's not even a team in the top 10. So I see this more as like who's going to get to the Rose Bowl and stuff like that. And I think Washington State might be able to this year. But they got to beat teams like Stanford and Washington, obviously, or they're not going to get close. So I'm going to say Washington State wins this game against Stanford. Stanford doesn't seem like they're too good of a team this year. I think Washington State will edge it out. But it's really about that game against Washington. Because Washington still has the better players, the better coach. So if you can beat that team, then you're looking really good. But we need to move on. So Michigan we talked about last week too. Big win against Michigan State. What did you see from them? Their first road win against a team that's ranked in the Jim Harbaugh era. What did you see from them in that game against Michigan State?
Michigan flat out controlled this game from start to finish. And I have to give Michigan credit as well. They came out and they did their job and they played their game. I think Michigan State really didn't do anything offensively. So I don't know if that was because of Michigan's good defense or because Michigan State has a horrible offense. I didn't get to see the whole game. I saw more the first half than anything. And really, Michigan State, they had a possession where they were backed up to like on their own 10-yard line. They threw 3 straight like go routes, not Hail Marys, but like fade routes, and they were all the quarterback threw all 3 of them out of bounds. So it's like, what kind of offense are you running when you're just kind of heaving the ball up and you don't even give your receivers an opportunity to catch it because the ball is literally landing out of bounds every single time? So I think Michigan State came in with just a horrible offensive game plan, but like I said, I have to give credit to Michigan because they came out and just stymied Michigan State the entire game. Michigan deserved to win this game, and for this game, they proved why they belong in the top 10. Now, I don't know if I completely trust them going the rest of the way, but Michigan looked like a top 10 team against Michigan State.
Yeah, and look, they got a lot of help. Ohio State killed by Purdue. Wow. I mean, did Nick Bosa really make that big of a difference? Woo. Right? 49 points to Purdue. So Michigan, I'll tell you this year I'm on the Michigan bandwagon. I'm going to be rooting for them. I want to see them, and I want to see Harbaugh in the Final Four. I think they might have turned the corner. This was a big win for them. And the old Michigan wouldn't have won this game. They would have lost to the rival on the road. I think they turned the corner. I think they can go the rest of the season undefeated, and I think they can make the Final Four.
Michigan has a bye this upcoming week. The following week,
Penn State,
they're at home against Penn State, so that's another.
And they're going on the road to Ohio State, right?
To end the season, they are going on.
So
the road.
that's that again. So this is a lot like the Washington State thing. You have a Michigan team that I think can win every game besides the last one, right? You go in and that's the toss up. I don't know who's going to win that game. So very similar situations there. We need to move on real quick though. Last thing we want to talk about. Got about a minute and a half left. Georgia and Florida. Who wins this game? This is pretty much to see who's going to get it in the SEC championship game for that division. So who wins the game?
This one's tough because, I mean, Georgia going into the year looks so good, right? Yeah. Coming off the loss in the championship game, but we're like, okay, they're going to bounce back. Georgia has a couple bad losses. They get whooped in one of their losses. I have to go with Florida right now. Florida's just kind of the hot team.
It's in Florida, too.
It's in Jacksonville.
Yeah, it's close. The states are very close to each other, yeah.
I have to give this one to Florida. The way that Florida's played, I did not expect Florida to be in the top 10. I mean, I knew Florida was a talented team, and I thought they'd maybe hover around the teens. But the way that they've been able to maneuver up the ranks this year, they're sitting at 6-1. So is Georgia at 6-1 as well. I'm giving this game to Florida. I think Florida right now is riding high. Georgia has just been too inconsistent for me. Even though I would say Georgia has better talent overall, they have not been able to put games together consistently like they should be doing. So I'm giving this game to Florida because I think they're just kind of riding a better momentum right now.
I'm going to go with Georgia. I think they have the better talent. I think they have the more experienced quarterback in Jake Fromm. I'll go with Georgia. I think Georgia's still a team that can make the Final Four. So a quick prediction, I'm going to go with Georgia. All right, obviously you've been hearing the music while I've been talking right there. The podcast is coming to an end. Good podcast today, Jared. Next week, like we said, will we be talking about Game 7 or will we be talking about who won the World Series? You'll find out next week, and obviously you'll be watching the World Series. Obviously, LSU and Alabama talk next week as well. Some more NFL talk. The trade deadline's coming up, so we might see more trades. Much more to talk about here on the Cover 2 podcast next week. So tune in next week. For this week, I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And this has been the Cover 2 podcast.